Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your guest co-host, longtime friend of the show, Big Marley, Kyle Marley. And today we're going to be talking about UFC Vegas 89, Amanda Ribas versus the former two-time strawweight champion, Rose Namajunas. And my friends, it's going down this Saturday night live at the Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. You got two fighters that they're kind of floating between weight classes, kind of at different spots of their careers. Like I mentioned, Rose Namajunas, one of the greatest strawweights of all time, knocked out Wiley, knocked out Joanna. I mean, when she gets you, she gets you. And Amanda Ribas, man, she's come a long way. Everybody loves her personality, but you can't sleep on her skills either. And if this goes all 5 rounds, I have a feeling it's going to be a very exciting and telling main event this Saturday night in Vegas.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I mean, it's not the greatest main event, that's for sure, but it is definitely an interesting one. I think it's a decent card for betting as well. But yeah, if this main event goes 5 rounds, it's definitely going to be interesting. I mean, if you go and look at the stats on this fight between these two fighters, from reach down, every single stat favors Amanda Ribas. So Rose getting like a minus 250 line, it is a little bit wide in my opinion. But I do have to favor her. I mean, she's definitely more dangerous. Ribas' chin's a big-time issue. But who are you liking in this one? I mean, I think it's closer than the line indicates, but I still favor the former champ.
Yeah, so let me just set the table. Amanda Ribas, she's 12-4, taking on the former two-time champ, Rose Namajunas, who's 11-6. They're meeting at flyweight. And currently, they got it. Rose Namajunas, minus 205. The comeback on Amanda Ribas is plus 175. And that just depends where you look, because certain books have it minus 250 Rose with a plus 200 comeback. And Kyle, it's interesting because a couple days ago, it was plus 240 Ribas. And just off the bat, when you see a number like that, I was like, okay, now I'm intrigued and I'm curious to see where this line goes. I wake up the next day, it's plus 180. So, it's one of those things. Two different scenarios there, but I was interested at the plus 240. I might even be interested at plus 200, but let's break it down. So Rose Namajunas, ultra talented. I mean, I think she's got some of the best hands, not just in the strawweight division, but in women's MMA history. One does not simply knock out Joanna Jędrzejczyk. One does not simply knock out Weili Zhang, not to mention some of the other great accomplishments she's had throughout her career. She's incredibly fast. She's athletic. She's talented. She's fast twitch. We talk about her punches. What about her kicks when she knocked down Karate Hottie with that head kick? And not to mention, you hear every Rose Namajunas interview, and it's funny. She says, I'm going to take her back and choke her out. Like, she literally says that every interview, and then she ends up like knocking these girls out. So, as far as just watching her and appreciating what she's accomplished, I mean, I can't say anything bad about that. But here's the thing, man. When she doesn't get her first round knockouts, fights tend to kind of be up in the air a bit. Like, for example, you watch that rematch against Jessica Andrade, right? The first time Rose got slammed on her head, knocked out. The second time they fought, it was a very close fight where it seemed like towards the latter rounds, up close, that first round, Namajunas is popping her head back. She's doing whatever she wants, but mid-second round, start to get to that third round, those calf kicks started adding up for Andrade. You give me 2 more rounds there, I think Andrade wins that fight. You look at the rematches against Joanna and Weili, and credit to Rose for winning those fights over 5 rounds. Some people thought Weili might have won that fight, that rematch. Now, I bet on Rose in that spot, and I actually bet Rose in the Joanna rematch too. So I was happy to come away with the win, but the point I'm trying to make here, Kyle Marley, is when Rose doesn't starch people and fights do get extended, that's when things get interesting. And I don't want to say it's a cardio issue, because I mean, she does train in that Colorado elevation. So it's not like, it's not like she doesn't have the lung capacity or something. I've heard people say she loses focus in fights, but also I think that she kind of has that bully mentality where, when she's the hammer, it's, one of the best of all time. But when you stand up to the bully, that's where Rose kind of, historically will have these flake out moments in fights. And not even that, man, like not just that, excuse me, but you look at that second Carla fight, where the first fight, Carla actually choked her out. The second time they fought, it was literally one of the worst fights in UFC history. And Rose was stuffing the takedowns, but she literally wouldn't let things go on the feet. So, I often don't like to talk about, which fighter is going to show up, because you guys have heard me say this. I feel like it discredits the opponent. But with Rose, you really do have to bring up which version of her is going to show up. And with Ribas, I think Ribas is extremely skilled. Ribas has a similar quality to Phil Haas. Like, when I talk about Phil Haas, dude, I talk about this guy has literally everything I want in a fighter except a chin. I mean, D1 wrestling, one punch knockout power, freak athleticism. If Phil Haas had a chin, this dude could go all the way to the top. And I think there's a similar thing to be said for Ribas. I mean, can you criticize her striking technique? Maybe the defense. Okay, maybe the defense. But can you criticize offensively? I mean, she's throwing spinning kicks. She's got a good diversity of strikes. She can mix in takedowns. She's got judo throws. She's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I like everything about her. If this fight gets extended, I think that her output's on the higher side as well. And it's one of those things where Rose is very momentum based, Kyle. Like I said, when she's the hammer and you're not standing up to her, I mean, look out. She's going to look like maybe a future 3-time world champion. But if Ribas can if Ribas can get me past a round and a half, start to slow down Rose a bit, start to get some top control, that's where I think Rose, kind of gets in her head a bit. And that's where maybe her output starts to wane. So it's kind of binary to me. And again, me saying that, Rose has to knock her out in the first 2 rounds, that might not necessarily be true. I mean, you just never know. But before the fact, that's how I kind of handicap it. I think that Rose is she's a -2 something favorite. She's obviously capable to knock out Amanda Ribas, which, like, with women's MMA, it's very rare when you see women getting knocked out. And in this matchup, Ribas has been knocked out against Polyana Viana, against Marina Rodriguez, against Macy Barber. So it's happened multiple times, and Rose has knocked multiple people out. So that dynamic is 100% there. But in a 5-round fight, if you just tell me that this fight is 100% going to round 3, like, I don't know for a fact Amanda's going to win, but my inkling is that it would kind of, the momentum would shift to her side, especially if she's able to get on top of Rose.
Yeah, I would not want to be holding a Rose ticket if this one did go all 5 rounds, especially if you're paying like -250 or so. That's just too high. I mean, I think if this is a 5-round fight, the stats are going to be really close. Either one of them can mix in takedowns, spend time in top control, threaten with submissions. I think if either one of them is going to rock the other, it's going to be Rose rocking Ribas. So I do think most of the line equity is all in the finish. So instead of paying -215 or -250, whatever it is at this point, I kind of like, I haven't played this yet, but money line finish only, where it's only graded if there's a finish. Rose is -280 there. So that's what I would rather take if I'm trying to bet the Rose side. But I think you're right. If you're betting the money line, this is dog or pass at this point. And especially if this one does go, if we're turning off knockouts and this one does go all 5 rounds, this is much closer to a pick'em fight. I still give the slight edge to Rose just because she's been there before in 5-round fights. I think the striking is going to be neck and neck. Rose is hard to hit, a lot of dancing around, but we're in the small cage here. So it's going to force a little bit of action. I just think with 5 rounds to work with, though, that action is going to lead to Ribas getting knocked out. So I'm picking Rose by TKO here. And it's just because, I mean, we know how many times Ribas has gone out, but I feel like she just doesn't eat shots well either. She took some bad shots in her last fight as well, ended up getting the knockout herself. But Rose is just so slick, and I think one of these head kicks might land and just put her away. But I don't know. I'm not betting it. I'm definitely not laying this line on Rose. So we'll see. I don't hate your side if you end up playing Ribas there.
It's just so interesting because it's hard for me. Again, back to the whole which version is going to show up. And I really hate talking in those terms, but it's like you see her second fight against Carla where, like, Carla's defenseless on the feet, man. And like Rose is one of the most dynamic strikers in the history of that division. And she's not even letting her hands go. And she's actually stuffing the takedowns and stuff. I was like, what is going on here? And then the Manon Fiorot fight, she did lose that fight, but like she fought tough with one of the best women on planet Earth. She's obviously beat some of the best women on planet Earth. She is one of the best women on planet Earth. It's just tough to gauge, is she going to get into a fight with Pat Barry the morning of the fight and then, pull a stunt? She doesn't have Trevor Whitman in her corner anymore, which I think is suspect as hell because that guy brought you to the dance. And yeah, so it's a tough one for me. So when it's tough, it's dog or pass. It's just, I'm aware, I'm not delusional. I know that Ribas could get starched for the 4th time. Like, it doesn't take a genius to understand that, but there's a 5-round fight. Let's see if it gets extended. If it does, I'm leaning towards Amanda Ribas. So let's see what happens. Now, next up in co-main event of the evening in the heavyweight division, we got Karl Williams, the former NFC champ. He's 9-1, taking on Justin Tafa, who's 7-3. And currently, Kyle, they got it. Karl Williams -190. The comeback on Justin Tafa is +165. Now, on paper, this one's binary. But here's my question for you. And when I say binary, you know what I mean. But for those that don't know what I mean, look, Justin Tafa's got that kind of old school Mark Hunt style, the Tuivasa style, one of these big Samoans from down under. You time a sloppy shot on him, he'll get you with that uppercut. He's got a nasty left hook, big leg kicks, elbows off the break. But when those guys typically get taken down, they tend not to get back up. And Karl Williams, so he's from here, as you guys know, from here in Georgia, and he went to the same high school as Cody Durden. Here's where I'm not sure. I know they both went to state, like the state championships for wrestling. I think Cody won it. And I want to say Karl's also a state champ wrestler, but I don't quote me on it. But I know for a fact he had a very, very solid, a high school wrestling career. The guy can mix it up. And his last fight against Chase Sherman, it's funny, I was at that fight. And at that fight, I thought Chase Sherman did really good considering like what the odds were. But when I rewatched it, there are little subtleties that you don't actually notice when you're at the fight compared to watching it on your TV with the commentary. You get a better view. And I actually thought that Karl's striking look improved. But the thing is, dude, let's not test our stand-up against Justin Tafa. Like, please, like, why give this guy a chance to win? I really do think Kyle, it could be a 1 takedown situation and the fight might be over shortly after based on what I've seen from, I don't like to say, Justin Tafa, is Mark Hunt, is Tuivasa, but those guys literally have the exact same style. And when they get put on their back, they're like turtles. I mean, these guys cut to 265 pounds, Kyle Marley. So they're going to weigh 300 pounds on fight day. When you're 300 pounds on your back, how many times can you explode back up to your feet? So you could see a ground and pound stoppage by Karl Williams. You could see his first submission win, or you could see him grind it out. We know the dangers on the feet, but I think that's the only path for Justin Tafa. So I'm going Karl Williams here because I think he can win the decision. I think he can get a ground and pound TKO, and I think he can get a submission too, whereas I only see one path for Justin, and that's that walk-off knockout, which are always amazing to see from those guys. But I'm going to go with the NFC champ, Karl Williams here.
I definitely agree, and I don't think the line is wide enough on this one. Again, like if we're turning knockouts off, I'm not sure that Williams isn't beating Tafa in a 3-round striking match. I mean, Tafa's a guy who's lost to Jared Vandera and Carlos Felipe in 3-round striking matches. I don't think that Karl Williams is much worse than them, if worse at all. I think he could be better than him. And then, yeah, the wrestling is just going to be completely on the Williams side. It hasn't been too good for the Tafa and them and that crew. His brother lost recently. Tyson Pedro lost. Tuivasa lost. None of them are good wrestlers. They got nothing to offer off their back. So it's 1 takedown for Williams, and he grinds out the rest of the round, or he finishes them at some point. But yeah, don't test your striking in this one. Don't eat that one shot. But the fights that Tafa wins in, he's landed a combined 34 strikes in those fights. And that's just the kind of guy I like to fade. Let's just avoid the knockout, win this in a smart way. It didn't look good. Williams going like 1 for 10 in his last fight on takedowns against Sherman, which I think is why the line is shrinking in this one. But man, just keep going after him. Go for 20 takedowns if that's what you need to do in this fight. As long as you're clinching up on the cage and you're not giving Tafa the space to knock you out, then I think this is all Williams, and I think that the line should be wider than it is. So give me Williams. I think there's value in the money line right now.
One question for you. So you mentioned how, he lost Tafa lost to Jared Vandera and a couple, lower level guys, which I think is a very valid point to bring up. And in most cases, massive red flag. And I want your opinion on this. Should we cut him slack for the sole fact that, this guy came into the UFC at 3-0, right? Like super inexperienced, kind of had to pay his dues a bit. Was it simply a case like that? Or is it, I don't give a fuck if you're 3-0 or 4-0. If you're losing to Jared Vanderaa, it's a red flag no matter what. Like, where do you stand on that?
I mean, definitely a red flag. And I don't think he's learned a ton. Like he's only landed like 24 strikes since that Vanderaa fight. So I don't think he's had enough cage time. I don't think he has the training partners to really get him better in a 15-minute striking match. He's a KO or bust fighter, in my opinion. And if he doesn't knock out Karl Williams, he's going to lose this fight.
Now, next up in the middleweight division, we got a matchup between Edmen Shahbazyan. He's 12-4, taking on AJ Dobson, who's 7-2. And currently, Kyle, they got it. Edmen Shahbazyan -200. The comeback on AJ Dobson is +170. So here's what we do know. Edmen Shahbazyan is extremely talented, but back to the kind of bully talk, like when he's the hammer, it looks great. But when you stand up to the bully, he tends to break in fights. And yeah, I can give him a pass for losing to Fluffy Hernandez and some of the top 10 guys he lost to, for sure. Like you're a young kid, when you're running through everybody in the first minute and all of a sudden you're fighting a top 10 guy and they actually stand up to you, I get it. But then you look back at that Darren Stewart fight, and I feel like I've been like talking about Darren Stewart like the past few pods, because remember like when Kevin Holland fought recently against MVP, and I was talking about how like when I laid chalk on Kevin Holland against Darren Stewart, I mean, he gave me the sweat of all time. And guess what Edmen Shahbazyan did too when he fought Darren Stewart? He was hanging on for dear life in the last round. So the point I'm trying to make, Kyle Marley, is that it's not just top 10 guys. It's every single time Edmen Shahbazyan has been extended past the first round, minus like the Dalcha fight, shit tends to get sketchy. And it's worrisome laying these kind of prices on guys like that, especially when it's been proven time and time again. But that being said, what's interesting about this matchup is not only is AJ Dobson a massive step down compared to the guys that Edmen's been fighting, AJ Dobson doesn't really push the kind of pace to possibly take Edmen Shahbazyan into that ultra fatigue state where, he's kind of looking for the door. Like, Anthony Hernandez is going to attempt a million takedowns. It's just, you're still dealing with a guy in Dobson who's athletic, who hits hard, and who is making improvements. You look at his last fight against Tafa, and I thought that was the best performance of AJ Dobson's career. Like, for example, he was another guy where it was kind of like first round or bust, and then fights got extended, and it'd be kind of sketchy. Like you look at that Armin Petrosian fight, got picked apart for 3 straight rounds pretty much. So what I'm wondering here, Kyle Marley, in a low output fight where Edmen doesn't need to really be pushed to the limit, is this kind of a fight where he's going to get back on track, or is he a busted prospect to the point where the confidence is diminished and a guy like this who isn't on his level on paper can come out here and get the upset?
Oh man, that's a good question. And I wouldn't mind seeing this fight go all 3 rounds. I think it could be interesting, but both of these guys have knockout power. I would also like to see him stand in a phone booth and just bang it out. But for me, I'm kind of on the underdog in this one. At this line, Dobson is really scary, man. When he commits to it and he's throwing his punches, trying to hurt his opponent, he's one of the scariest strikers out there. But he is a little inactive. He's not throwing as much as I would like for him to. So, yeah, I don't think he's just going to tire out Shahbazyan. I think it would be more that Shahbazyan tires out himself. Maybe the first round goes to Shahbazyan and he throws out a little bit too much output and he can't hang in there the second and the third. And right, I do think Dobson will be there all 3 rounds. I think that maybe the second and the third round could favor Dobson in the wrestling department as well. But plus 650 right now on Dobson by knockout, I think that's a pretty decent number. Also, Dobson to win in round 3, it's different across the board, but like plus 1,800 or so. I mean, we get Shahbazyan to tire out. Dobson's power still hangs in there. I could definitely see a knockout in the 3rd round by Dobson. So I'm kind of looking at some props in this one, but at the same time, I do think that there's a little bit of value in the money line, because if we get a 15-minute striking match, I think all the rounds will be pretty close, and maybe the longer it goes, the more it plays into Dobson's favor. And I mean, maybe he's fighting for Mark Coleman here a little bit too, and that adds a little bit of intensity to him. That's what I would like to see. Just go out there, be a little bit more aggressive, and then I would definitely lay the price. I just don't really trust him because we haven't seen it yet, other than there's a few fights that he finished in the first round where it's like pedal to the metal. but when he's actually getting extended, he's not really looking for the knockout, it seems. So I haven't laid the bet yet, but at this point it's dog or pass, and I am thinking about a Dobson bet at some point along with those other couple props.
So you know what's interesting? You know how we talked about how like Dobson's a lower volume guy, right? And in his last fight, he landed the most strikes he's ever landed in a fight. It was about 67, 68 significant strikes. And to us, you know, as guys who love numbers, you know that 68 strikes in 3 rounds is low, right? Like, but let me tell you something, Kyle Marley. That's more strikes than Edmen Shahbazyan's ever landed in a single fight he's ever had. So that's kind of interesting from that perspective. So to me, I just have a hard read on it because I do think that AJ Dobson's making improvements, but I also think this is a massive step down. It's just like, where's Edmen's confidence at? Because like he was one of those guys that when he first got signed, it was like, oh, I'm going to be the youngest champ in UFC history. I'm going to break John Jones' record. I'm going to do all these things. And, you know, despite the fact that he lost a, you know, legit competition, it's how he lost. There were demoralizing losses. He broke more than once. And at what point, you know, like you have to go through a lot of mental work to pick yourself back up to like convince yourself that, hey, I can still be a world champion, especially a guy this young. Like, how old is Edmen? He's still a kid, right? Like, let me check.
Yeah, he's real young.
He's 20. He's 26, Kyle. He's 20. He's just a kid. He's 26 years old, man. Like, it's crazy. And you know, AJ is only 32, which is, you know, he's, you know, reaching his prime and whatnot. So yeah, I do think it's a dog or pass situation from a betting perspective. I'm going to lean towards Edmen because I think that Dobson's not going to push the pace necessary to get Edmen to that, you know, that state of wanting to look for the door. But at the same time, when you've seen something happen so many times, you cannot be surprised if it happens again. So I'm rooting for you. I hope you cash that bet. As far as pure picks, we're on opposite sides, but I ain't laying no -2 nothing on Edmen Shahbazyan. So I wish you the best of luck on that, man. Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got a matchup between 2 top prospects. We got Payton Talbott. He's 7-0, taking on Cameron Saaiman, who's 9-1. Currently, they got it. Payton Talbott -140. The comeback on Cameron Saaiman is +120. I love this fight so much, man. You know, I think that Cameron Saaiman is probably the more technically sound guy here and possibly the quicker guy, but there's certain intangibles about Payton Talbott's style that are kind of like immeasurable, like that, you know, like when's the last time you saw a dude do like a backflip off a single leg attempt? And then in his next fight, he does another like backflip, and he's just like, he's massive for bantamweight, and he's one of these guys that has insane cardio, doesn't stop. He tends to kind of be a bit of a slow starter, but you know, tons of great fighters are slow starters. Look at Peter Yan. Not comparing them, just saying tons of great fighters are slow starters. And in 5-round fights, I really think this kid's going to excel. Cameron, I like Cameron. I mean, his kicks are nasty. I think he's good everywhere. You watch that fight with C-Rod. It turns out C-Rod's an absolute stud. Like, it doesn't matter how you score that fight against Bulgarian. One thing we can all agree on is that was a hell of a fight and a very high-level fight with great scrambles between 2 top prospects. Like, I don't think any less of Bulgarian. I don't think any less of C-Rod. I think that both guys have an upwards trajectory. And that fight between C-Rod and Cameron Saaiman was a hell of a fight. Yes, C-Rod clearly won, but man, Cameron, he impressed me. Like some of those front choke attempts that C-Rod had, and the way that Cameron was able to scramble out of them. And even though he was outmatched in that fight, he still pushed really hard all 3 rounds, tried his best. I respect this kid a lot. There's just, again, first L time is going to come for Payton Talbott. I'm just not convinced that this is the spot where it happens. There's certain physical attributes about Payton that's gonna take him far in this game, and just the fact that the way he goes into the pocket, you know, recklessly or almost carelessly, but like he's got insane durability. Like guys are gonna break with his style down the stretch, and I don't see Cameron breaking, but I might see Cameron kind of getting out physical here. Like Cameron, it probably hurt him to drop to 25s, but if one guy would drop to 25s here, it'd be Cameron. If one guy would go up to 45s here, it's Payton Talbott. I just think he's going to be the more physical guy, but I expect it to be an honest scrap because this ain't no Nick Aguirre anymore, who actually won the first round against Payton Talbott. This ain't no Reyes Cortez, who actually won the first round against Payton Talbott. But the way Payton comes back in those second and thirds, and yeah, I like the kid. I also like Cameron Saaiman a lot, so I expect this to be an honest 3-round scrap. I'm going to lean with Payton to edge it out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I don't really have a strong lean on this one. I feel like first round goes to Saaiman and the third round goes to Talbott. So it's going to come down to that second, in my opinion. And I mean, I feel like everyone's on the Talbot side, so I'm just kind of going against the grain at this point with these odds. I think it was a little, at a pick'em. I think it was cool going with Talbot, but now I think I started doing my research when he's like plus 125. So like, I got to go with the underdog. Now I do think this is closer to a pick'em fight. So I just went with Saaiman in this one, but I do expect this to be fight of the night. I expect it to be a high paced, two studs who could be possible future title contenders. So looking forward to it. But I'll take the guy with the plus next to his name and go with Saaiman.
Yeah, and you actually kind of just answered the question I was about to ask you, because you mentioned you think both are potential future title challengers, and you're not going to get a disagreement from me. And I guess what I wanted to ask you was, because the way people regard Payton Talbot right now, I've heard people say he could beat O'Malley. I've heard people say this guy is guaranteed to be a future world champion. And I'm not disputing that. It's just, to me, I do pride myself on my ability to scout prospects and what I think their ceilings are. And with Payton, I'm still kind of like taking a wait and see approach. I'm still like, I'm not writing off the possibility of greatness, but I'm also not writing off the possibility of first L being around the corner either. So where do you kind of like, have you kind of planted your flag on what you think the ceiling is on this kid like others have, or are you kind of taking a wait and see approach as well?
I think this is the fight to wait and see with it. If he can go out there and really look impressive against this kid, then I'll say, okay, he's definitely got contender status. But if I had to say so right now before this fight, I would say he's not going to be a future champion. But this is going to tell a lot. And if he does beat him, then we'll see how he looks against C-Rod next.
Absolutely. And I'm curious to see how Cameron bounces back, because, again, it was a great fight with C-Rod. This kid's got a lot of pride. He trains with great people like Drickus, and he seems like he's someone that lives and breathes this, you know. And it's funny. I was going to say, normally I'd say no guy that paints his nails is beating Cameron Saaiman in a fight, but this dude Talbot, man, he might be a little bit on the weirder side, but the young man can fight. The young man can scrap, and he's got those intangibles. So I cannot wait for this fight. That's probably definitely one of my fights to watch, Kyle. So next up in the featherweight division, we got a banger between Billy Quarantillo. He's 18-5, taking on Youssef Zalal, who's 13-5-1, and he's welcoming him back into the UFC's octagon. Currently, they got it. It just depends where you look. Some action has come in on Zalal. It's minus 150. Billy Q, the comeback on Zalal is plus 120. How do you kind of see this one going? Because a lot of Billy Q fights are kind of predicated on, he'll take that ass whooping up front, and if he's still there and you're huffing and puffing, you give Billy Q an inch and he will take a mile and then some. And he's just such an attritional fighter that's willing to go to war with anyone. And Zalal is kind of more of a point striker, which is an interesting dynamic here. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I think it's another fun fight. I kind of think that the small cage favors Billy a little bit because that lateral movement from Zalal, I don't think it'll work as well. He's not going to be able to run away as much as he would like. And I do think that Billy is a kind of slow starter. So first round maybe goes to Zalal here, but Billy picks it up as the fight moves along. Usually he just looks better and better as the fight moves along. And I think he should start looking for takedowns in this one to slow down Zalal and get rid of that lateral movement. Look for takedowns. Press this guy against the cage if you need to. I think the close game favors Billy a little bit in this one. And I think rounds 2 and rounds 3 are going to favor Billy. I think he'll be the more active striker. And especially if he can land takedowns, I think he's going to do a lot with his takedowns, where if Zalal lands takedowns, which I think he could, I just don't think he's going to do as much. And I think Billy's more likely to get up or threaten from bottom even. So in this one, I'm going to go with Billy. Maybe he drops the first and wins 29-28. But I also think that the first could be super close and maybe just takes it 30-27. So for me, it's favorite or pass in this one. But I do think it goes all 3 rounds.
Yeah, this is interesting, and this is one of those spots where, like, one of the hard things about becoming a fan of a fighter, and then like Billy Q, like, how can you not be a fan of Billy Q, right? Like, the guy, he personifies like what a fighter is, and also the fact that he's like not the most physical guy, but he uses what he has to his advantage. And I mean, I love Billy Q. And also, like, on a personal level, we follow each other on Twitter. He's been on the show before. We've interacted from time to time. So it's nothing but love for Billy Q. And it's tough, when that's why you don't want to develop too many like relationships and stuff like that, because it could kind of mess up how you see the fight. But that being said, man, with all the respect I have for Billy Q, I think this is a very interesting matchup. Reason being is this. So a lot of Billy Q's fights, like I mentioned, are predicated on, his opponents beat the shit out of him. And then Alex Hernandez was literally teeing off on him. But Alex always gasses out after round one. Anytime a fight gets past round one with Alex Hernandez, shit gets sketchy. And Billy Q put it on him in a way. That last fight against Damon Jackson, round one, Damon Jackson was using Billy Q's head as a speed bag and took his back mounted him, did whatever he wanted, and then gassed out by beating up on Billy Q. And then Billy Q comes back with that insane volume. He's just such a dog. It's insane. But here's my thing, though. Like, a lot of these guys that have been gassing out, like Youssef Zalal has never had like a gas problem. And it might be, to your credit, due to that kind of low volume approach you were talking about. This is a guy that won round 3 against the current champ, Ilia Topuria. This is a guy that won round 3 against Damon Blackshear. So, and a bunch of the fights he's been losing were like close split decision fights against tough guys that could have gone either way, like the Sean Woodson fight. One thing you got to understand about Woodson, he's like 6'3" with an 80-inch reach. He just presents a completely different challenge to Billy Q. And people are going to mention the short notice, which I think you have to. But the thing about it is that Zalal was originally called to be on The Ultimate Fighter. So he was already in shape. And The Ultimate Fighter was actually supposed to, they're filming as we speak, Kyle. So it's not like this guy was off the couch. This guy apparently has been training with Isaac Dulgarian twice a day. So, and I heard his interview with Lynch. Interviews are not the be all end all, of course, but he said the biggest difference between what's going to happen now and what happened in his first stint is that now he's got the confidence and the maturity. When he first came into the UFC, Kyle, he was like, 21, 22, 23, right? He was just a kid. Now he's a grown-ass man, 27, 28, starting to go into his prime. So I expect to see some maturity. I like what I saw in his fights post-UFC. Granted, they were against cans, but he treated them like cans. I mean, he looked like a guy that clearly belongs in the UFC. So it's a tough one to call, but the way I kind of see it going is that I do kind of think that Zalal can pick him apart and not get, what's the word? Goaded into that brawl, that dogfight that Billy Q likes. I feel like Zalal can kind of play it safe and frustrate Billy Q. You watch that fight Billy Q had with Gavin Tucker, who you watch his fight with Ricky Glenn, and you think by watching that, oh, that's all that Billy Q has to do. Let's survive this first round and then just beat the living shit out of him. And like Gavin Tucker, who's chinny, who's, had a lot of issues in his career, was like out there hitting 7 takedowns on him. But I know what your counter is going to be. Gavin Tucker also landed over 100 significant strikes, which is something that Zalal has never done before. So that's an interesting point. But I'm just curious if, with Billy leaving all those openings, a sniper kind of guy like Zalal, he might not have the more volume, but he might have the more impactful shots and might be able to mix in takedowns. So I guess where we kind of disagree, besides the pick, is you're seeing Billy Q having a lot of takedown success. And that's where I'm not saying you're wrong, but that's where I'm kind of not sure if that's really the case. Like, I think both can get takedowns. It's just I just see Zalal kind of being the better athlete here and a little bit quicker, a little bit slicker. And I think he can kind of skirt by this one by decision. But, I don't want to be the guy to be like, oh, Billy's 35 now. He's turning 36. Everyone's been talking about how 35-year-olds and this and that, but that's not always true, man. I mean, look at Alex Poatan. He's like 36, and just won the belt. So, that's not always true. So I think it should be a very good fight, a competitive fight. And when it's a competitive fight, I tend to lean towards the dog a little bit, but not going to lie, I would have liked a plus 140, a plus 150 more. So I'm going to kind of wait to see where it goes, because I think Billy Q is a fan favorite, and rightfully so. So let's see where the line goes. I'm going to lean a little bit towards the law here. What's up, guys? I want to let y'all know about my newest sponsor, Betting Hero. So I've partnered with Betting Hero to get you guys the best sportsbook offers in the U.S. This week's offer is a first bet insurance offered by BetMGM Sportsbook. New customers can get up to $1,500 back if their first wager loses. To get this offer, click the link in the show description and select the BetMGM offer. Now, guys, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369-NY. Call 1-800-327-5050. And you must be 21 and up. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP-AZ for Arizona. 1-800-BETS-OFF-IA for Iowa. 1-800-981-0023 for PR. First bet offer for new customers only if applicable. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnerships with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. So see betmgm.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. So, guys, basically, this is great for bettors looking for more spots to play. And you get some great boosts and all those kind of things you like. And also with this week's book, BetMGM, I like the fact that they offer same game parlays, not for UFC, but for other sports as well. And they just got a bunch of other great things to take advantage of. So if you guys want a good deal, a good, bonus and whatnot, definitely click the link here and Betting Hero will get you all set up. So shout out Betting Hero for sponsoring today's episode of Half the Battle. And I hope that they can help y'all find some good deals and some new books for those that are looking. So shout out to the fans and shout out to Betting Hero. Much love. Next up in the featherweight division, we got a matchup between Luis Pajuelo, he's 8-1, representing Peru, taking on Fernando Padilla, who's 15-5, representing Mexico. Currently, they got it. Fernando Padilla -165. The comeback on Luis Pajuelo is +136. Kyle, I mean, this should be a banger. This kid, Luis Pajuelo, one thing to say about him, he got that dog in him. I really respect this guy a lot. You watch his Contender Series fight against Robbie the Promise Ring, and the way that he bullied this kid, butchered him. I loved his body work, but there were certain things I saw in the fight that kind of I'm not sure going to fly at the UFC level. And let me explain what I mean. Firstly, I'm not going to take away from this guy. I love the tenacity. I love the will to win. And I'm a huge fan of brawlers. I like guys that go out there and fight like men. And that's exactly what this guy does. So I'm a fan of Pajuelo. But in that fight against like Robbie Ring, so he rocks the guy, he hurts the guy. And then 2 seconds later, he's on his back. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves when you drop or hurt someone. And then 2 seconds later, you're on your back. We're going to talk about this kid, Jarno Aarons here soon, who did the same thing his last fight. And like when Pajuelo was on his back, instead of trying to get back up, he's trying to punch off his back. And it's fun to watch, but as you start increasing, levels of competition, that stuff is not going to fly at the UFC level. So at best, I think that this guy is an exciting brawler. Kind of like, do you remember that kid that made his debut against Matt Frivola, Mexican kid who got dropped like 6 times, and then he fought Natan Levy?
Reyes?
Not Reyes, but fights like Polo Reyes, but not Reyes. What's that dude's name? Valdez. Gennaro Valdez.
Oh, yeah.
Him. So it's like we love watching guys like that, but that brawling style, while it's so exciting, and I think Pajuelo could come to the NFC or some local promotion and do great, but at the UFC level, in my humble opinion, they're going to have to be very selective about who they match him up with, because there is a big hole on the mat in terms of like I don't think he's just going to get insta-subbed or anything like that, but I think he can be taken down and neutralized. Now, luckily for him, Fernando Padilla likes to bang too. But the thing about it is Fernando Padilla has got more than twice the experience, and there's some physical advantages he brings to the table in this matchup. For example, he's got a 7-inch reach advantage, and he's a guy that uses that 7-inch reach advantage. And one thing about Pajuelo, while I love the dog, I love the enthusiasm and the brawling style, he's a bit on the slower side. And when you're trying to close the distance against a guy with a 7-inch reach advantage, I think there's a chance you're going to get your head popped back a bit. And also Padilla, even though that last fight against Kyle Nelson, people are holding it against him. Listen, what you got to understand is that Kyle Nelson came into the UFC and dropped a bunch of fights because he kind of tried to take dudes out early in fights and then he'd gas out and whatnot, like in the Billy Q fight. But Kyle Nelson kind of changed his style more recently to kind of a more safe style, like you saw in the Padilla fight, like you saw in the Blake Builder fight. So, and at this point, we got to kind of consider Kyle Nelson to be a seasoned vet, as crazy as it sounds, because at one point I thought it was going to be 2 fights and out, and he stuck around. So I got to give him credit. So even though I enjoy watching Pajuelo 10 times more than I enjoy watching a Kyle Nelson fight, there's something to be said for experience and paying your dues. And I just think that Padilla right now is kind of on a different level than Pajuelo. I really hope that it pans out for Pajuelo because I enjoy watching him fight, but I think there's a lot of holes in his game, and I think that Padilla is seasoned and long enough to pick this man apart and either win the decision, because I think it's going to be hard to knock him out. I wouldn't write it off, but he seems durable as hell. He seems tough, so I'm gonna go Padilla by decision
here. Yeah, I agree. Well said. And I think Padilla by decision is like plus 225. I think that's a solid line. This Pajuelo kid, yeah, I mean, he's a banger, and he looks to take off his opponent's head with every strike he throws type thing, where Padilla is just going to be picking his shots, and he fights longer, and he's got that 7-inch reach, so I think he's just going to stay on the outside. I also don't like how Pajuelo eats shots. He'll cover up a lot when he's getting hit, and I really don't like when that happens, and I don't see Padilla doing that. And I don't expect either one of them to really look for takedowns on this one, but if either do, I think it's Padilla that would have the wrestling and grappling edge. So I do agree with Padilla being the favorite, maybe even favored or pass on the money line, but I think that the Padilla by decision prop is the way I would look in this fight and maybe take a stab at that.
And next up in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between two veterans. We got Trey Ogden, he's 16-6, taking on the Ultimate Fighter winner, Holobaugh, who's 20-7. Currently, Kyle, they got it. Trey Ogden minus 155. The comeback on Holobaugh is plus 135. What's your opinion here? Because this is a pretty interesting matchup between two vets.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a pick'em fight where Ogden's getting the respect based on his last fight where he had a career best performance against Mata, who just has no ground game. He went out there and dominated him on the ground. But I don't think you really do that to Holobaugh. And Ogden's not a great wrestler. I feel like the wrestling edge probably goes to Holobaugh. These guys are both solid grapplers. Either one of them could get a submission, but Ogden has been submitted 3 times. The striking's probably a little bit close, but I think Holobaugh has a lot more power. And on average, he lands 4.89 significant strikes per minute compared to 3.64 for Ogden. So all the stats are telling me that it's even like favoring Holobaugh a little bit. If I have to favor somebody in this fight, I slightly favor Holobaugh. So I feel like the recency bias on Ogden's side is now's the time to fade it. So in a pick and fight, I always want the plus side. If this was a plus money for the Ogden, I'd end up picking him as well, I'm sure. But it's a pick and fight, plus 125, plus 130, whatever that is. I think there's value there in Holobaugh. I don't like that he's getting up there in age, 37 or whatever he is, 38. But Ogden's he's not young either. He's like 2 years, 3 years younger than this guy. So I'm on the Holobaugh side. I think this is one of the better underdogs on the card to target, and I think he can win by any method.
I agree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because, listen, I do respect Trey Ogden. I think that he's a very intelligent and cerebral guy, and I actually think that he's a fantastic coach. And once he retires from fighting and he can fully focus on coaching, I think he's going to have a lot of success there. Not that he's not having success in the octagon, because he absolutely is, But the thing you got to take into consideration, like you were talking about the pace, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because like you look at his fight, and first of all, we can say no guy that, lost to Jordan Levitt and Thomas Gifford is going to pan out in the UFC, but I got to give him credit. He's come a long way since then. He beat Daniel Zellhuber, but again, when you watch that fight, that was more of a, Tyler Santos versus Mara Barella, debut stunt more than it was, oh, wow, Trey Ogden's this big contender. I mean, if Daniel Zellhuber actually fought, I think he would have won, like you see the subsequent fights, and that's the guy we scouted going into the Ogden fight. So I just think that, he just had, the lights were too bright in the debut. He had a lot of pressure on him. It was what it was. They run it back. I got Zellhuber again. The Mata fight, you mentioned how good the ground game looked, which I'm glad you did. Obviously that arm triangle attempt at the end looked very deep, but how about that jab by Ogden? He was looking like Sugar Ray Leonard at points against Nick Mata, the way he was popping his head back with that jab. It's just here. Let me check what the reaches and heights are real quick. I'm curious because I know that Ogden was a lot taller and longer than Nick Mata. So here they're the same height. Ogden's got a 2-inch reach advantage. So I don't think that it's going to be as easy to pop a dude's head back like Holobaugh, who I do think is a more technical boxer than a Nick Mata, whereas Nick Mata just loves to swing those big looping hooks, overhands, and whatnot. So I do agree with you from that perspective. And also, you go back to some of these fights that Kurt Holobaugh lost on his first stint. I mean, like, he dropped Shane Burgos like in the first round, and then he got armbarred. It's funny. I actually picked Kurt Holobaugh in that fight because I'm like, Shane fights with his hands down, like, and he drops him. I was like, yes, Kurt. And then he gets armbarred like 2 seconds later. I was like, oh no. So it was cool to see him go out there and beat Austin Hubbard, finally get that first UFC win, get the Ultimate Fighter contract. Like, you love to see guys that have been paying their dues for so many damn years finally get their moment. And something funny, I actually had Holobaugh on Half the Battle, like in like 2015, 2016, when he was fighting like Titan FC against guys like Desmond Green and stuff like that. So I respect this guy. I've known about him for a long time, and I respect Ogden too. So I like both guys a lot, but I agree with you. I see it more toward, more kind of like a pick'em type fight. And Ogden, there is a lot of recency bias towards him right now. But at the end of the day, what's the most amount of strikes Trey Ogden's ever landed in a fight? His career best performance was the Nick Mata one. He only landed 58 significant strikes there. The Zell Huber fight, 71. Okay, that's a step in the right direction, but like, Zell Huber literally didn't fight back. So, it's just one of those things where the wins look good on the resume. I count the Mata fight as a win. I don't care about no contest bullshit, but I think there needs to be context said for those. And even though I don't want to plant my flag on Holobaugh and act like this is some mismatch, because it's not, I just see it being closer to a pick'em fight like you mentioned. So I agree with you from that perspective. And when that's the case, I tend to go with the underdog. So, it's going to be close. It could go either way. And with the state of judging today, like I mentioned it all the time, Kyle, you're not just betting against the fighters, you're betting on and against the judges too. So we'll see which way they take it. But if it's a split decision type fight, 9 times out of 10, I want to be on the underdog. So I'm going to also go with Holobaugh there. Now, next up in the featherweight division, we got a matchup between Ricardo Ramos. He's 16-5, taking on Julian Erosa, who's 28-11. Currently, they got it. Ricardo Ramos minus 148. The comeback on Julian Erosa is plus 128. So this is a very interesting fight for a lot of reasons, because I know that Ricardo Ramos is a bit on the flakier side, and I would say that Julian Erosa, minus his chin, is a really skilled guy. And I was talking to someone about this. I was like, what, you don't think that Ramos can knock him out in the first round? And my buddy was like, well, you and I can knock out. Oh, wait. I said, you don't think Ramos can knock him out in the first round? He's like, buddy, you and I can knock out Julian Erosa in the first round. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how scary would it be if you got into a fight with like Julian Erosa or like Phil Haas or one of these guys with bad chins? You hit them with your hardest shot and they're still there. Would that not be the scariest thing ever, Kyle?
That's like my nightmare. You like punch the dude in the face and then it barely moved. No, hey, let's talk this out.
Yeah, like you hit Erosa clean on the chin and he just stares at you, and now you got to deal with 100 significant strikes coming your way. It's like, oh man. But basically, when you look at Erosa, I mean, he's not just been knocked out, 100 times in the UFC, also outside the UFC in his regionals, and also on Ultimate Fighter. Artem Lobov knocked him out. You remember when McGregor jumped over the fence on that season of the Ultimate Fighter, and he rips his pants when he goes to pick up Artem Lobov and congratulate him. It was the funniest thing. But like, listen, if this fight goes past round, it's going to be interesting, because one thing about Erosa, everyone drops him, but when you hurt Julian Erosa, you must finish Julian Erosa. Okay, ask Sean Woodson, ask Charles Jourdain, ask Nate Landwehr. All these men dropped Julian Erosa, and I believe in the first round, all these men lost by finish. You look at his fight against, what's the name of the walking punching bag? Stephen Ocho Peterson. Dude, like, Julian was getting rocked all over the place, but Peterson couldn't put that finishing stamp on it. You don't put the finishing stamp on it. Erosa is extremely skilled. But here's the thing. Ricardo Ramos is what I like to refer to as a talented flake. I mean, he's 7-4 in the UFC. He's beat some really good guys. He's lost to some really good guys. And the talent's always been there. It's just from time to time, you'll flake out, especially back to that bully mentality type talk. But honestly, my gut and my pick, I think Ramos is going to come out here and get a KO1. I just think he's going to come out like your game plan to fight Julian Erosa should be, and I'm, from a non-coach saying this, your game plan should be to say, fuck it, let's headhunt. Let's sell out to try to get this knockout. Because if we want to have a technical battle with Julian Erosa, like, dude, Julian's good. If you want to, grapple with Julian, Julian's good. You have to headhunt. You must knock this man out. And I think this is one of those spots where Ricardo Ramos can show off his talent, show off his, front running ability, go out there and get a first round knockout. And I think that's what's going to happen. So I got Ricardo Ramos by first round knockout, but if this gets past the first, all bets are off the table. But my pick is Ricardo Ramos first round knockout.
Yeah, well said. I agree with all that. I think Erosa is going to be the higher paced striker in this one, would probably be more likely to win a decision in a 15-minute striking match. The wrestling could be close. I'd probably give the slight edge to Ramos there. I was also, what Erosa's black belt? BJJ belt is? Because
I'm sure by now he's a brown or black belt.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I give Ramos the grappling edge, but I mean, he was just submitted by Jourdain. I mean, and Erosa's 12-0 to the submission, so I would like to see a grappling fight between these two. I think that would be fun as well. But yeah, that chin is just terrible. He's been dropped like 9 times in the UFC. I mean, Ramos isn't like a power puncher, but neither are the last 2 guys that knocked out Erosa, in my opinion. And Ramos could throw some spinning shit that he just doesn't see coming. So I agree. Ramos by knockout is the way I'd rather attack this. If I'm going to bet on this fight, give me plus 250 or better on Ramos by knockout. I just don't believe in Erosa's chin. I think it's one of the worst in the UFC. But you're right, man. If it does hold up, he's super live in this fight.
Yeah, maybe a live entry is worth a look. We'll see if it gets past round 1. Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got a matchup between Miles Johns, who's 13-2, taking on Cody Gibson, who's 19-9. And Kyle, I want you to go first on this one because I know what angles you're going to talk about here. A guy with 0 output versus a guy with insane output. But I know there's caveats, regarding Cody Gibson late in fights does tend to slow down. Could that be because he goes balls to the wall early? But this has been a recurring theme, not just in the Brad Katona fight. You look at the Ray Borg fight on his regional scene. You look at his first UFC stint. Like, that's been an ongoing theme with Cody Gibson. But Miles Johns has that Tyron Woodley style. Back himself into the fence. Athletic as hell. Can wrestle, can swing overhands. But, you have to wait like 2 minutes and 30 seconds for him to throw a strike. So I'm really intrigued to see what you have to say about this one. Break it down for me, man.
Yeah, I feel like you already know. I just think that the pace that Gibson can set, I don't think Johns can keep up with in a striking match. I do think Johns has more one-punch power, and he's the better wrestler, but he doesn't throw enough punches for my liking, and he doesn't wrestle enough for my liking. So I feel like, and he's taking this fight on short notice too, which is another worry. So it's not that I feel confident Gibson's going to go out there and win this fight. I do think he has the edge in maybe rounds 2 and 3. Could maybe, 1, 2, and 3, especially if Johns doesn't wrestle. But the knockouts on John's side, if he wants to wrestle, it could be on his side. I just don't think he's going to do it enough. I think Gibson can get back up and just put a pace on him, land some body shots, tire this guy out, and win 2 rounds, if not all 3. So it was just a plus next to his name that really sold me on Gibson being my pick. But I do think it's close to a pick-em fight. I was going back and forth. I think Johns could knock him out really in any round. And if he's smart, he'll go out there and wrestle. And I think he could grind out this fight if he was going to do that. But I don't know that he's going to do that enough. So I'd rather go with the pace of Gibson. He landed like 160-something strikes in his last fight. And I don't think Johns has that in him in 15 minutes. So I got to go with Cody, Google me, bitch, Gibson, man.
Hey, if y'all remember that reference, or if you don't, go look it up. This is some TMZ highlights.
Yeah,
but
way back, huh?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Kyle Marley ain't no casual, I'll tell you that much. But look, man, I've told the fans this ad nauseum. Remember when Raoni Barcelos was matched up against Miles Johns? The fight got canceled. But dude, the exact same reasons that you're betting on Cody Gibson here was the reasons I was gonna bet on Raoni Barcelos there. Like, you watch that Raoni Barcelos fight against Victor Henry where he lost, and like the individual rounds of that fight, he landed more than entire fights of Miles Johns. So it's just like Miles Johns, just that output so damn low, but he is significantly more athletic than this man. There's also no USADA testing right now, which there is in-home testing. And, my buddy Cody Durden did get tested recently, but like, I was looking at the guys they've tested, And like, tell me what you think about this. Like, you remember that dude Carlos Vera, not Cheeto Vera, Carlos Vera, who was just like flopping on his back like a couple weeks ago, and was just like playing guard the entire fight. And he's like this like 36-year-old with love handles and shit like that.
Yeah. Against Nakamura.
Yeah, him. So they've apparently tested that Carlos Vera guy more than they've tested Ludovic Klein. like, you understand what I'm saying here? So like, yeah, I get they got the in-house testing. And again, I don't want to say things that aren't true. I don't know the ins and outs, but to see, this fat dude that's like 36, like rolling to his back every 5 seconds, you want to drug test him more than you drug test fucking Ludovic Klein. I told you, my birthday is coming up in October. I want an appointment with Ludovic Klein's doctor, So to me, and Miles just popped. Now, granted, I think it was for Adderall, which some people say is a performance enhancing drug. I think it is in terms of like studying for tests and shit like that, but I'm not sure if it is athletically speaking, because I've heard a lot of people say when they take that, it makes your heart beat so much that like you can gas out a lot quicker. So I don't know, maybe his ADD medication. I don't know, but he's no longer at Fortis MMA. It's just interesting to me because one guy is significantly more athletic, which is Miles Johns, but one guy has the dog and pushes paces, and we've seen Miles break plenty of times before. But man, it's just hard for me when I've seen Cody. This is not just a one-time thing, like I said in the Katona fight or the Borg fight. Even some of these other fights, like I love that he beat John Dodson. That was great. I've never been a Dodson fan of just because like every 5 seconds, it's like, oh, you pulled my hair. Oh, you kicked me in the balls. Like you remember all that shit like every 5 seconds. Basically what I'm trying to say is I think there was this fight. I think it was against Francisco Rivera. You remember Cisco Rivera from the UFC days?
Oh, yeah.
Like he was a big time brawler, right? Dude with all the tats. Like, he was one of the premier 135-pound brawlers. And if y'all that never seen John Lineker versus Francisco Rivera, one of the best 1-round fights of all time, I'm pretty certain if it's not Francisco Rivera, y'all let me know if it was someone else. Didn't Francisco Rivera drop like Cody Gibson like 1 or 2 fights ago, like badly, like real badly? And props to Cody Gibson for coming back. But you got to take into consideration, isn't Francisco Rivera like 43 years old or some shit like that?
Probably.
So what I'm trying to say is Miles Johns gets him in similar situations. Like Miles can be getting out volume the whole time, but that one big overhand, a couple calf kicks start chopping him down a bit, and Miles may have success here. So I kind of lean towards Miles, but I am not going to bet chalk on Miles Johns against an output machine, period, point blank. So I'm rooting for you. But you know what my concerns are. I mentioned them already. And I can't wait to fade Miles Johns again against the output machine. Watch me pass here, and this is the time to do it. But I just personally don't trust Cody, but I'm not going to talk you off it either. And I wish you the best, my man. Now, next up in the featherweight division, this is interesting. We got Steve Nguyen making his UFC debut. He's 9-1, taking on Jarno Arons, who's 13-5-1. Currently, they got it. Steve Nguyen minus 165. The comeback on Jarno Arons is plus 145. So, I don't think Steve Nguyen is anything special. You went life and death with that AJ Cunningham guy who Ludovic Klein just literally like punted out the octagon recently. But I gotta give Steve Nguyen credit. He's a guy that went on Contender Series 3 times, finally got his UFC call. And you look at the numbers he put up on Contender Series, man. I mean, like those are numbers that like we were talking about the Ione Barcelos, Miles Johns fight that never happened. This is another example where you look at the individual rounds of the Steve Nguyen fights that he's had, and he lands more in those fights than Jarno Arons landed in total fights. Let me talk about Jarno, because I don't think he's bad at all. Like I actually do think that he's got some decent kickboxing. He's got from time to time some opportunistic submissions, like you saw in the Gomes fight. Like he's had moments in both his UFC fights. Like the Willem Gomes fight, he had a nice, I think it was a triangle choke at the end of the fight. The Sungwoo Choi fight, he dropped him in the second round. But dude, I talked to you about it earlier. One of my biggest pet peeves is when you drop your opponent and 2 seconds later you're on your back. And that's the kind of guy that Jarno Arons is. Let's talk about round 1 of the Sungwoo Choi fight. Jarno Arons is out there. He's throwing the volume. He's out there throwing some really unorthodox kicks. Like you can tell this guy really wanted to get that first UFC win. He's going for it, but he's going for it to a fault where he's getting rocked. He's getting overzealous and getting hurt. And then he's shooting sloppy shots, ending up on his back. That's round 1. Round 2, drops Choi with a nasty uppercut. I'm like, okay, Jarno, okay. 2 seconds later, he's on his back eating bows. I'm like, dude, Third round comes through. It's like, all right, it's do or die now. It's possibly 1-1 going into the third round. And this dude, Jarno, eats one leg kick and then he falls down to his back, gets held down the rest of the fight. Like, I just cannot bet on guys like that, despite the fact that I don't think Steve Nguyen's bad, but I think Steve Nguyen will, he's not going to have an undefeated UFC record. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. Like, there's going to be a time to fade this man. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was here, but I just think the output difference. Like, one thing I liked about that Nguyen fight against, Cunningham, I get that it was life and death, and that's a bad look, but like, he kept trying. He kept going for it. He's not a guy that will drop you and then will be on his back 2 seconds later. So even though he got tagged up a lot, he's got a good chin, man. I mean, the only time I've seen him get knocked out was that flying knee. Hey, a flying knee, it is what it is. You eat one of those knees to the chin, that ain't a chin issue. That was an impactful shot issue. So I do see the volume of Steve Nguyen being too much in this spot. But I like Jarno's, like, I like his spirit, and I like the fact that you can tell he wants to win, but there's something in the fight IQ that I just can't get behind. I already told you the examples, like, because it's going to piss me off when he drops Steve Nguyen and then 2 seconds later he's on his back eating elbows and he loses the round. Like, I hate that kind of shit. That's the shit where I throw my remote at the TV and, so I'm going to go Steve Nguyen by decision here.
Yeah, me too. I just think that he's going to volume him up. Definitely nothing special, and I think Aaron's is more dangerous, really, with submissions and knockouts. Like, he'll throw some wild stuff, maybe some spinning shit that he can knock out Nguyen with. But I just see him landing like 40, 50 shots throughout this fight, and then Nguyen landing 120 or something like that, and just clearly winning all 3 rounds. So give me Nguyen by decision.
Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got a match between Montserrat Rendon. She's 6-0, welcoming Daria Zalesnikova, who's 8-1. Currently, they got it. Montserrat Rendon or Daria Zalesnikova minus 210. The comeback on Montserrat Rendon is plus 180. Look, it's interesting because Montserrat, she's kind of bigger for the weight class, but with that said, she's a lot slower. She's a plotter. I picked her in her last fight because I thought Tamira's Vidal at minus anything. I mean, come on, dog. Like, you cannot be doing shit like that in a UFC fight. And the thing, I like Daria striking, man. Like, on the feet, like, damn, girl. Like, you can tell she's got a kickboxing background, mixes in the punches to the knees to the kicks, like level changes. I like it. But there's questions about that ground game. Like, you saw a fight or two ago, she did get pounded out. Now, granted, the girl she got pounded out against was actually a top 15 UFC fighter. Look it up. Melissa Mullins is ranked in the top 15 in the UFC. Look, I'm serious. She beat Russian Ronda her last fight. So at least it was against a real opponent. But that being said, if I know on the feet, I favor Daria, but like, if Montserrat can get on top, does that mean that round is over? She's securing top control and Daria ain't getting back up. Like, what's your take?
That could happen, but in my opinion, Montserrat's not a good enough wrestler to rely on that. And I don't think she had any real wrestling success in her last fight. She got 3 takedowns in that fight, but all 3 were catching kicks. She caught 3 of Vidal's 47 kicks that she threw. 40 of them landed. So I feel like just don't get your kicks caught and you'll be able to stay on your feet. And Rendon is just too slow and telegraphed with her striking, where I think Daria's going to be so much faster, so much cleaner with her hands. And if she doesn't even want to throw kicks, she doesn't have to. She can go out there and box this girl up. So I think I think this one's going the distance, but I do like Zalesnikova to keep it on the feet and win probably all 3 rounds. I just wasn't sold with the wrestling. I was trying to talk myself into an underdog pick with this one, but I was like, let me see the wrestling. If it's there, we could do it. But it just wasn't there. Every single takedown was catching a kick. Maybe she could do that here, but she just didn't do it enough in that last fight for me to have any confidence that she could do it with catching kicks nor real wrestling. So give me Zalesnikova by decision.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about who has the higher ceiling, I definitely think that Zalesnikova has the potential to be a future top 15 fighter. I mean, she's nasty on the feet. And also, I kind of hope that, like, someone that takes their career seriously and after that first loss, that could be a wake-up call. That could be like, hey, like, you're not just going to knock all these girls out and just destroy them like you've been doing on your regional scene. Like, there's other hungry girls out there that are going to figure out your weakness and exploit it. So hopefully that was a big wake-up call. because these are things you can tighten up in your game. Like, this is not like, I talk about it often. It's not like she got dropped by a jab or like you can't fix your chin. Your ground game can be improved. Your takedown defense can be improved. And if she just leveled up this much, she might make it look easy here. But I'm going to pass because, I talked about it earlier in the show. Sometimes these debut stunts, Zellhuber versus Ogden, Tyler Santos versus Mara Barella. Sometimes the better fighter doesn't always win on that debut. The lights might be too bright, whatever the case is. And it's what, minus 210? Yeah, so I'm all good on that, but pure pick, Daria. Now, next up in the flyweight division, this might be one of the best fights on the entire card. We got Igor Da Silva Severino. He's 8-0, former Jungle Fights champion. He is only 20 years old, Kyle Marley. He's taking on Andre Lima, who's 7-0, also repping Brazil, who's 25 years old. So, I mean, I love seeing stuff like this. Like, people get mad. Oh, why are they feeding the prospects of each other? Fucking, I want to know who's better. This is a high-level fight. You can let them both crush cans. Fuck that. Let's see who the better prospect is right now. And maybe they can meet again down the line. But Andre Lima on the feet is incredibly impressive. Like, I was like, dude, this guy can strike for real. Like, the way he effortlessly switches stances, he gauges his range, and whether it's the kicks, whether it's the punches, mixing it up to the body, his takedown defense has come along. Like, I know that the weaknesses we've seen is that he has been taken down, and at times he's been held down a little bit, but like, it's not like dudes are like passing his guard and like mounting him and like almost submitting him. It's not that situation at all. It's more of like he's very relaxed in there. So he might not fight off the takedown as hard, but what I've seen is that he's able to explode back up to his feet. From there, he walks you down and he methodically picks you apart. With Igor, he's a little bit more wild on the feet. You saw that fight he had on Contender Series. Man, the way he was just throwing left hook after left hook and eventually got that guy out of there. You love to see that aggression. And this kid might be a phenom, being only 20 years old. He's been fighting since he was 15, already a champion in a respectable promotion like Jungle Fights. Hey, like, hats off to you. I just kind of think that Andre Lima, right now has more of that grown man strength. And like for 20 years old, man, like, there's going to be some ups and downs no matter how talented you are. Like, remember when Rory McDonald came to the UFC and he had to fight Carlos Condit the first time, and like, he had to pay his dues too before he made it to his title shots and stuff like that. And he was like the young phenom at the time. This kid being 20 years old, he's the new young phenom. But one thing I like about Igor, there's lots of things I like. I love the aggression on the feet, but the ground game, here's where I think that he might have an edge, because what I like about him is he's got this kind of like standing back take. He's able to kind of get a body lock from behind and then sit back and take people's backs like that. I'm wondering if he's able to kind of kill clock in situations like that. I don't think he's going to submit Andre Lima by any means, but I do think, although Igor's got good stand-up, Andre's got like legit, like, he's got like what, 70 like Muay Thai fights or some shit. Like, you could put Andre Lima in glory right now and he'd do fine, right? Whereas Igor, he's got good striking for MMA. So I think on the feet, I definitely favor Andre. And it's just, if he gets taken down, you just got to do what he did on his regionals. Chill. And when it's time to get back up, then we kill. So I lean towards Andre Lima here. I think that both guys have very bright futures, but I'm going with the more developed fighter at this point. I think that's Andre Lima, but I think you can expect both guys to crack the top 15 in the near future for sure.
Yeah, I really agree with everything that you said. I'm looking forward to this fight, and I think that Lima is the rightful favorite. Just a better kickboxer. Definitely has power in his hands and his kicks. And he's the type that's trying to hit his opponent without getting hit, where Severino's like, okay, taking a shot to give out two of his own. But I mean, 20 years old, I was really impressed with Severino, and I like his uppercut quite a bit. I mean, I don't know that that's going to come into play here against a better overall striker, but I think that Severino could just make this a dirtier fight, push a pace on him, get on the inside, start landing maybe 2 to his 1 on the inside. Don't hang out on the outside where this guy can kind of pick you apart, and then mix in takedowns where you can. And I feel like at this line, I would rather take my chances on that happening and go with the underdog, make it a dirty fight, and maybe win 2 rounds. Probably would be a split decision, and you got to trust these 3 idiot judges. But I always would rather have the plus side when you got to do that anyway. So 20 years old, man. Allegedly, this kid's going to get better and better every time out. So I'm just going to go with the underdog, but I'm looking forward to it. If Lima wins, it won't surprise me at all. He could knock him out. He could win 2 or 3 rounds striking. But I think this is going to be an awesome MMA all-around mixed martial arts fight, and give me the guy who will mix in more takedowns. So Severino.
Well said. Now, last but not least, in the heavyweight division, we got Muhammad Usman. He's 10-2, taking on Mick Parkin, who's 8-0. Currently, they got it. Mick Parkin minus 145. The comeback on Mo Usman is plus 125. So, 2, heavyweight prospects right now, both outside the top 15, but both guys have aspirations of being future top 15 guys. You got Mo, who's the brother of Kamaru. You got Mick, who's the training partner of Tom Aspinall. Who do you kind of give the edge to here?
I like Parkin in this one. Usman, I mean, he's definitely strong. He's got some of the most power in the UFC just based on looking at the guy. And he can use that power to knock people out or take them down and kind of just hang out in top control. But if Parkin doesn't get knocked out here, I mean, I think Parkin could do the same thing, land takedowns, hang out in top control. We got nothing to offer for Usman off his back either. So I feel like it's whoever's first to the punch on takedowns. But I think just skill-wise, Parkin's the better wrestler, the better overall grappler as well. And he's got a lot more tools in his striking toolbox too. Usman's just throwing, jabs and right hooks. This guy hasn't attempted a single leg kick yet. If he lands one in this fight, it'll be his first one. But Parkin can mix in a full, well-rounded game. Just stay away from that big overhand right. And I think you can just pick this guy apart for 3 rounds. He didn't look good in his last fight in the striking department, so he had to rely on the wrestling. But I think he could do that here as well. If you want to wrestle Usman, I think he could end up doing that. But I also just think that he can win by any method, and the line's just not wide enough. Just watch out for the 1-2 or the 1-1-2 from Usman. If he shoots his telegraphed shot, then try and back up with them and just don't let him pile drive you. But yeah, I think if just avoid the power, and Parkin's just way better overall fighter, in my opinion.
So when you mention you don't think Usman's good off his back, are you referring to when former NFC heavyweight champion Brandon Sales took him down and pounded him out, or was there another example you had?
Maybe that's the one. I don't know. I do remember, back in the day, but I also just expect any offensive wrestler to have nothing to offer off their back, typically.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on the opposite side, but again, not that convicted because, I could see this fight realistically going either way. The thing I like about Parkin, I like that he's active. I like that he uses his jab, and I like that, for a tub of grease, this guy can go all 3 rounds. He's well rounded. I like the guy. One thing about Mo, man, it might not look the prettiest, but he finds a way to win, and I really respect that quality in a fighter. Like, you look at that fight against Pauga, it's clearly getting outstruck that first round. I mean, it was like, damn, what's going on, Mo? You're getting outstruck by a 205er, and then that second round just fucking deads him. The fight with Junior Tafa, the one threat that Junior Tafa brings to the table. You do not want to stand and bang with this man, and Muhammad controlled him for 12 minutes of that fight. You look at the fight with Jake Collier. Jake's a vet in the sport. First round was a little sketchy, but after that, I really like how he took over that fight. So, and with a developing fighter like that, I'd hope that, this 3-fight win streak gives him the kind of confidence he needs. And also, you learn from your mistakes every single fight. Not that Mick Parkin's not learning from his mistakes either, but just making a case for the underdog. I just like his ability to find that way to win. And I think Mick can be taken down here. And I'm expecting Muhammad to kind of, test the water standing a little bit. But if his head starts getting popped back with those jabs a bit, I expect him to level change here. And that's where it's going to get interesting. Is it a case where he can, use, that physicality you were talking about? The guy looks like probably the strongest guy, from, amongst the lower level heavyweights and whatnot. Is he able to kind of hold him down, or can Mick get back up, start to fatigue a guy like Usman, and then go back to work on the feet? So, but there is power coming from both sides. I would say, obviously, the cleaner striker is Mick Parkin, but I do kind of think the more well-rounded guy here is Usman. And back to, I'm kind of repeating myself, but I really admire that quality of finding a way to win, even if a fight's ugly. So I'm going to lean towards the dog here, and let's see what happens. Now, Kyle, before we get out of here, we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. I'm going to give you a second, so I'm going to go first. My fight to watch is the second fight of the night, the flyweights. Igor da Silva Severino, who's 8-0, taking on Andre Lima, who's 7-0. Like, assuming that none of these guys get like a career-ending injury or just randomly get slept multiple times, I see both these guys being future top 15 guys, future top 10 guys. Someone's always got to go in this matchup. Both these guys, they're making their UFC debuts, no less. Like it's not like either guy's getting set up with like a cupcake. Like, it's undefeated prospect versus undefeated prospect, two champs in different promotions. Like, this is a high level fight for the second bout of the prelims. Like, so for that reason, Kyle Marley, that's my fight to watch.
Yeah, I was definitely going to pick that one if you ended up picking this one, which I'll go with Talbott and Cameron Saaiman. I just can't wait for that fight. These guys are going to be around the UFC for a long time and towards the top of the division. And this fight could go anywhere, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be the highest paced fight on the card. Looking forward to it. Really don't even care who wins if I don't have a bet. Just looking to see their, potential ceilings, but I can't wait for that fight. That's really the main event in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, 7-0 versus 9-1. Payton Talbott's ranked number 83 in the world. Cameron Saaiman's ranked number 47 in the world. Like, and I think both these guys, again, like I was talking about with Igor and Lima, I think both these guys can be future top 15 guys, possible future top 10 guys. Some people think Payton Talbott might be a future champ. So I love seeing these matchups early on. And even if one guy takes a devastating loss here, like, dude, how many losses did Bronx take before he finally went on it, got it together? You saw the talent from day one, and then eventually went on to have this insane win streak, most finishes in the history of the sport, and become a world champion. So yeah, I just love seeing this, these kind of fights early on. And you never know, they could turn into rivalries, into trilogies. This is why we love this sport. Matchups like this, of course the big matchup, but I love good prospect showdowns. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely the other fight to watch. So Kyle, who is the fighter to watch in your opinion?
This one's tough. I think I'm just going to go with Karl Williams. Let's see how smart he is, how quick he shoots for that takedown, how easy the takedowns come against a guy like Tafa, who hasn't been taken down yet, is going to be a lot bigger than him. And if he doesn't go for the takedown early, let's see how he looks on the feet. I feel like he could outstrike Tafa as well. Just don't get knocked out, but be smart and just take this guy down, make it easy.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because, Karl Williams, former NFC champ, I called his amateur fights, and it's funny, and I don't mean any disrespect by this. Like, when I watched his amateur fights, it had never crossed my mind that this guy was going to go to the UFC, let alone be in a co-main event in the UFC. I thought, oh, it's just another cage pushing heavyweight. Like, like when I saw Cody Durden and Jared Gooden in the NFC, it was like obvious as hell these two are going to go to the UFC. Like, they just stood out. Karl never stood out. And the fact that Karl kept grinding and grinding and grinding. Funny story. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but him and Cody Durden, Karl and Cody Durden, they went to the same high school and they both went to the state championships together. So they've been grinding for a long time. So now to see Karl make it all the way, to the UFC, get on a win streak, make it to a co-main event. Like, I love seeing stuff like that. So 100% he's one of the fighters to watch for me. I'm gonna go with Youssef Zalal. Look, this is a guy that came into the UFC 21, 22, 23. He fought tough with a lot of guys, but he wasn't, there was something missing. He went back to the regional scene. His interview with Lynch, he said what was missing was the composure and the maturity. And he feels like that's what he has now. And that's what he's going to showcase here. And the thing is, they're not giving him a cupcake. If you're not ready to fight a guy like Billy Q is going to tee off on you in a way where you might not ever come back the same. So this is a real test. And for that reason, Youssef Zalal is my fighter to watch. Well, Kyle Marley, we did it. It's going down this Saturday night live at the Apex, Ribas versus Namajunas. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure having you on here. The fans can follow you at Big Marley 3. And I know you're working with a Ship It Nation. Anything you want to plug with your stuff, like let us know.
Yeah, if you guys are into DFS, Ship It Nation is the place to be. We got all sports. We got some of the best players in the world giving you content. And right now we got a promo code MASTERS15. We'll get you 15% off. We have some of the best PGA guys around, so we crush it at PGA. If you're into PGA at all, now's the time. You get 15% off, but all sports are included, which is the benefit of it. So you get all my DFS MMA content. When NFL comes around, we'll be crushing that. But it's just awesome to see every night we got people winning in the Discord. It's a great community over there in the Discord. So shipitnation.com. Go check it out if you're into daily fantasy sports. We've been crushing it, and we got the lowest price around. Now you can save 15% off that lowest price.
Yeah, and I mean, Kyle, at this point, how many times are you a DraftKings qualifier?
Oh man, I haven't been chasing qualifiers for a while, but I think I'm over 10. I maybe I want to say 12 or so.
I mean, we're dealing with a 12 times DraftKings qualifier. We're not dealing with some scam artist. So if you're into the DFS, you listen to my man, Kyle Marley. So definitely hit him up. And again, I want to give a big shout out to Betting Hero for sponsoring today's episode of the podcast. And again, if you guys are looking for new books to bet with, and for the promotions, the bonuses, the boost, all those kind of things that are going to give you, whatever you may consider, whether you consider it a slight edge, a slight advantage, whatever the case may be. If you need new places to look to get your action down, they are the resource to help you out. And I'm grateful that they're supporting today's episode of Half the Battle. So all those links are going to be in the description for y'all to check them out and see if they can help you out. So thanks again to all the fans. Thank you to Kyle Marley. And guys, until the next time, let's cash these bets.